I think it'll be fun to talk about how to prepare for shows. And my focus, I thought, would be to start out talking about preparing for a Minnesota Watercolor Society's juried show. And then I thought what I would do is talk about some of the differences for some of the national shows. And then we'll have a basis to compare once we have gone through what the Minnesota Watercolor Society requires if you're thinking of entering that show. And the spring show is a juried show, meaning the judge of the show looks through all of the paintings that are submitted, and then the judge, based on whatever criteria the judge comes up with, chooses the paintings that will be in the juried show. If you have that aspiration to want to enter a juried show, the first thing I tell people is, if you want it too much and it's going to break your heart not to get in, then you should rethink submitting. So in my opinion, I think I don't enter a show if it's going to break my heart if I don't get in. I feel like there's a subjectivity on the part of the judge. I think that's a good thing to get in your mind. Is it doesn't mean you're a bad painter. It just means what your inspiration that you submitted just didn't fall in with what the judge was hoping to include in what the judge wanted to represent as a show. So for the Minnesota Watercolor Society, when you've got your painting ready and you think you want to submit it, there are a list of exhibition rules that you should go to on the website. So when you go to the Minnesota Watercolor Society website and look at the little tab that says exhibitions, and it'll say spring show, fall show, and exhibition rules, you need to click on exhibition rules to see what's required when you're putting your painting together. I mean, there are size restrictions on how big the framed piece should be. There are some restrictions on how small your painting should be. So when you're considering a painting that you've got completed, you need to take all of that into consideration. Does the painting that you have fit what the requirements are? The other thing is, there are some details about what materials you can and cannot use. So rather than going through that, since you can read it easily, I just urge you to go through and read the exhibition rules. It talks about things like the painting should be no more than 2 years old. Again, materials used. We're a water media society, so your painting can have watercolor, gouache, casein, acrylic. It can have all 4 of the water-based mediums, or it could have 3 or 2 or just one of them. So all those are fair game for the Minnesota Watercolor Society, since it's a water media organization. What I'm going to run through, and I thought this would be helpful for everybody, I'm going to actually share my screen, because I thought what I would do is pretend I'm going to submit a painting that I've got. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. So what I did was actually painted a small painting for tonight's talk. I painted this little butterfly, and I thought what I'd do is act like this is the painting that I'm going to submit to the show. So I just actually finished it. I painted a few of these for a class I taught when the point of the class was negative painting. So we had a pretty little butterfly, and then I showed people a negative painting demonstration. So I went ahead. This was one of the ones that I had partially finished, and I just finished it for this demonstration tonight, so I could show you how I go about thinking about, okay, I'm going to submit a painting to a show. So the next thing that you'll be seeing is, I'm trying to, get another phone handy, and this phone has a camera in it too. And I'm going to show you the viewfinder of my camera. And what I do is take a picture of my painting with my iPhone. Now, this is an iPhone 7. This is the one that I've been using for a long time. And if you can see, I'm holding my iPhone in a way where the picture is, you know, the best I can get. And here's my little cheat. If I can position my camera over my painting in such a way that none of those corners are showing, I don't get any distortion that way. So what I would do is click my shutter on my camera and then take a look at the picture I took in photos. So what I'm doing is now going to photos, and there it is. And with that, I've got a tool in my camera. I can actually edit the photo I just took. Oops. In here, there's a little edit button, and then I can go to crop it. And if I need to crop any, like say I clicked the shutter and a little bit of the white of the background was showing, I would crop that out. So when you're submitting your painting, you need to somehow get a photograph of it. Now, you can take your painting to a professional photographer. I know years ago, before I ever had a cell phone that would do this kind of thing, I thought, I think I can do this myself. So here I've got a nice picture that I took, and I wanted to talk about a couple things. Once you've got your photograph and it looks good, you need to rename it. And in this brush strokes that we got, I'm just going to show you quickly. There's a page on how on your device, how to change the name, because your little device just gives it a number. And there are instructions on how to change the name. The other thing I'm very aware of is I have to make sure the size of my photo isn't too big to send. So what I do is I go into Photoshop. I've got Photoshop elements loaded on my computer, and I can change the size. And there are lots of different programs you can use to alter the size of a digital image that you take on your cell phone. Again, the other thing you can do is just go to a professional and have them provide you with the digital image that you would need to submit. So once I've got my photograph and I've already, looked through the list of rules and requirements, the other thing is framing. Now, you can take your painting to a professional framer. And if you do this, what you need to do is make sure they understand there are a couple of requirements about the matting on your piece. Minnesota Watercolor Society has the rule that if you're submitting a piece for the show and you're going to provide the frame for it, the first thing I want to tell you is you've got your choice of a white mat or an off-white mat. So I cut these mats for tonight so that I could show you. Okay, here's white on my little butterfly. And then I would just think, do I like it really white? Or do I think it would look better with an off-white mat? So those are the choices, white or off-white. I have been the show chair a couple of different times, and I can tell you there are many people that get confused. The prospectus says a neutral mat, white or off-white, and that we mean white or off-white. So say I thought the white mat looked best, and I want to go ahead and frame it. Then I'm going to pretend that, tell you what I'll do. I'll just do the whole thing. I'm going to I've got a piece of foam core here, and I'm centering it I already drew the little pencil lines that'll show me when it's centered on there. And then what I do is either use masking tape or linen tape, linen hinging tape, to secure my painting to the foam core backing. And what I sometimes do is make a little hinge on the back, and that I thought that would take too long to show you how to do that. So another option is, if I'm choosing the white mat, I'm just going to take my painting. You can see another little demo on the back. That's something I frequently do. I get all the good out of my watercolor paper that I can. So if I do a demo and then want to repaint it, I will often tape that there. Okay, so what I did was tape this to the mat, but sometimes I do a reverse kind of a tape process and tape the picture to the foam core backing. And then what I have here is a frame with glass in it. So next, what I would do is put my painting in a foam core backing here, and then I would secure it in the frame. Now I've got a contraption that actually shoots pieces of metal that'll hold this in. And you know, it's something that you can buy online if you look up materials that framers use. But here's my painting in its simple frame. And I didn't want to take this to completion in this frame because I want to show you another option that you've got in the Minnesota Watercolor Society. So if I thought, you know, I think I want to frame it the alternate way where I could put this on canvas. So if I want to put watercolor paper on canvas, here's a canvas. And the reason I know about this is I have submitted to the Watercolor Society shows a couple different times doing them on canvas. So if I want to have a white border around my painting, I can just put it on a plain white canvas. And then the mediums that I'm going to be showing you are mediums that I've experimented with. So I want to show you first Golden's, and it's called Matte Archival Varnish. And on the label, it says Mineral Spirits Acrylic, and it's an aerosol. This is the one I like best. I like Golden materials. What you're doing is putting an acrylic varnish on the surface of it. Now, you're not supposed to breathe in the fumes of this, so when I'm gonna treat one of my paintings this way, I do this outside. And I chose a warm day, the warmest day that we've recently had. I quick ran outside and I actually sprayed this with short little bursts. I don't actually let the spray hit the painting longer than about 2 seconds. And then I wait another like 5 seconds and I turn my painting a quarter of a turn and I spray it another 2 seconds, because what I don't want to do is activate the watercolor with this spray varnish. And it's possible to do that. If you spray too long, you're actually spraying, it goes on as a liquid. You could activate the watercolor underneath. So in order to not do that, I do short 2-second sprays, and I do maybe 3 or 4 of those, turning my piece. It only takes about 5 minutes to dry. So once it's dry and it's actually protected, technically what you've done is turned your watercolor into something that is mixed media, because now this has an acrylic spray varnish on the front of it. So this was pure watercolor, but once I sprayed the varnish on it, it turned into a mixed media piece. So the next thing I do is I've got something called Golden's soft gel. But what soft gel is, it's an acrylic medium like matte medium. And if you're familiar with acrylic painting, you can water down acrylics with water, but the manufacturers of acrylic paint say you can't water it down beyond 30% without changing the molecular structure of your acrylic paint. So if you're painting with acrylic paint and you're wanting to thin down and you've thinned it down past 30%, what you can also add to it is medium. Medium is acrylic paint with no pigment in it. So I also have matte medium because I love to use it for collage. I use it for all kinds of things. It makes a wonderful glue. Soft gel is like super thick matte medium. So what I do, and it just does, it dries even faster than matte medium dries. Matte medium dries like regular acrylic. So what I'm doing is grabbing one of my brushes, and I've got an acrylic painting brush here, and I'm just dipping it in water. And what I'm going to do is paint this right on the back. Now that I've got the other side finished, I don't care what's on the back. You know, these watercolors that I've done before, they don't go through. And this one I didn't spray, and just putting on this soft gel, it's actually activating the paint that was under here a little bit, not too bad. And then what I'm doing is to buy myself a little bit of time. This dries so fast. How fast does it dry? It dries so fast that I've got a little spray mister, and I'm going to give this a shot of the spray mister so that it doesn't dry so solidly before I put a little of this soft gel on my canvas. And this dries clear, so if a little bit eases out, I don't care. The other thing you could do is paint your painting the exact size of the canvas, and then you don't have to worry about leaving a little border. So what I decided to do was, because we talked about having a matte on the piece and we wanted it white or off-white, I thought I would use this as another little memory device for you to remember that it should be white or off-white if you have a, okay, so what I'm doing is moving it down just a little bit so I can eyeball it. Now, what I'm doing is, I've got a pretty good eye because I do a lot of framing, and I've sold a lot of work this way. And what I'm doing now is using my fingers to press the edges, and I'm wiping up the excess soft gel that is just a teeny bit kind of oozed out of the back. And then I've got something that I've been using. I never throw anything away. So as a watercolor artist, I always say, you know, don't throw anything away ever. When I take the strip, the protective strip off of, you can buy mat board and you can buy foam core that have one sticky side. When I take those strips off, I don't throw that away because this is like wax paper. So it's clean. I'm just making sure it's clean. So now it's clean. I'm going to put this upside down, and I've got a brayer. This is a little roller with a handle on it, and this rolls kind of like a rolling pin. And what I'm going to do is start in the middle and brayer this. So what it's doing is really increasing the way this painting is touching the canvas. It's making the two really stick together. What I really developed this way of framing, sometimes I paint huge. I have painted on materials that were the biggest canvases I could find. So when I went to Dick Blick, I've had clients that just wanted enormous paintings and they wanted them done in watercolor if I could. And I thought, how am I going to frame the thing? It would weigh way too much. So I developed this just by experimenting and reading online what other people had run into. So for me, that idea of using this technique came from figuring out how I could frame something that I wanted it to be huge and then not worry about the weight of the frame and the plexiglass or the glass. Certainly a huge sheet of glass would weigh too much. Okay, so when I turned it back around, it looks like I've got really good touch points and connection. So because I sprayed that archival varnish on first, that protects the surface of my painting. And now what I've done is I've adhered it to a canvas using soft gel. And that creates a bond that I have actually tried getting these apart when I've thought later, oh, I'm just not too happy about that. For whatever reason, if I wanted to take them apart, I cannot get them apart. So this is already stuck on there pretty well. I think because I just did it, I could probably get it off, but I don't want to. I decided I would keep this on a canvas. But here's another thing you can do. If, say, you tried your best and you got it on and then you looked at it and you thought, oh, it's a little bit off, it's a little bit cockeyed, you can put tape toward the inside of your painting and paint a little white gesso or white acrylic to get it so that it's straight. How do I know that little cheat help thing? Well, because I had to do that. The other thing I wanted to tell you is sometimes after a show, if you've prepared it for a show and had the white border and then got it back and it didn't sell in the show, I thought I'd show you a couple of other things you can do. Here's one where I just thought this. Now, I never entered this in a show. I just painted it and then thought, once I got it home, I thought, I think it would look better with a little bit of orange on it because there was some brilliant orange in here. So I taped the edge of the painting and then taped a little bit on the offside with masking tape. And then what was showing, I just painted orange. And then I ripped off the masking tape that protected the side of the painting and then the other side that protected the white canvas. And it looks like it's got a mat and then another mat. I just wanted to let you know you've got lots of options when you handle a painting this way. So if you get it cockeyed, you can go back and correct that with, the white paint, and it still looks fine.
A question from Anne about the butterfly one, asking if the edge is a decal edge.
Yes, this was a decal edge. And what I wanted to tell you, I showed you the decal edge because one of the ones that I did, I actually framed it like this and used my materials to stick it to the canvas. And then when I was done, I didn't like the look of the decal edge. So what I did was put a ruler down, drew a line, and then put masking tape right on the edge. And I just painted that decal edge away with white paint so that it matched the canvas. And you could switch it to off white if you wanted. So this does have a decal edge. It's a cool thing to know. And it's very inexpensive once you've bought your mediums. So once you buy the soft gel and the archival matte varnish, those are the biggest investments in it. But we're not quite done yet. There's one more thing I do. And when I am preparing a piece for a show, the last thing, and I'm just touching it to make sure it's not feeling too wet, I found this. It's called Dorland's Wax Medium, and Dick Blick carries it. I don't know if Cheap Joe does yet or not, but I know I have found it at Dick Blick. And if you check, online, you can see where else you could get it. But this wax medium is a wonderful, wonderful thing to know about. So what I do is after I've done the gluing with the soft gel, I take a soft cotton cloth like this, and I just grab a little dollop of my Dorland's wax medium, and it's DORLAND wax medium. So I'm just gonna, it kind of comes out like Crisco or like, I don't know, 1950s cold cream. And I've got a glob on my rag, and I'm just gonna rub it on the painting. And because I protected that painting with the spray, it's not gonna smear. The archival varnish protects it. This is like in place of the glazing. I've had people say, well, why would you put the wax on? It protects the piece. So I'm just buffing it in, and you can see that the paint's not running. And what I like to do is come in with the wax and kind of rub it against the grain over the little ridge of the paper. So then when people actually touch it, they don't feel that ridge as much because there's a little bit of wax there. So what I've done now is just buffed it into place until I don't really feel it on the surface anymore. And the first time I did this, I was actually showing a piece to the curator at the Arboretum, Wendy DePaulis, when I'd been playing with this, figuring out how I was going to treat some of my canvas or some of my paintings this way. And as I got out of my car, it was a day where it thundered and lightning and rain came down. And it rained on all me and the paintings I was bringing in, but they were protected this way. I could, now that I've buffed it in, I've got a container of water. Oh, I know what I'll use. Here's my Windex spray bottle. I'll spray water on it, and it just beads up. So I've got a paper towel here. I'm just gonna get rid of the water, and there's no color or anything. You've created a covering for this that it's just protected it. So I love this stuff. I think everyone should buy Dorland's wax medium. In fact, I should buy stock in the company. So back to this. I put it on here upside down. So I would, if I'm going to sell this, what I'm going to have to do is change these because I was talking and I noticed what side. But I did want to mention one thing. When you're doing your framing, if you're doing it yourself and you're not having a professional framer do your work for you, when you put the wire on the back, and I have two little eye hooks, very interior, and there are lots of ways to do this. I'll show you a couple of other things you can buy. You can buy pieces like this that you just nail into the sides of the frame to hold the wire, like this on each side. And I've got some smaller ones too. Here are some smaller ones if your painting's not very big. You can get these in all sizes. Hardware stores sell these. And then here's a tip. I'm going to tell you my secret. If you go to Axeman, sometimes you can find a bin of things like this. I have a framer that I sometimes use. It's Stephanie, and she has a company called Artist Choice. She just moved from north of Minneapolis to Baldwin, Wisconsin. And that's kind of a hike to go, but she's a wonderful person. Just remember artistchoice.net. She frames for artists at a reduced rate. Anyway, when I have her put these metal loops on my painting, she charges $5 extra. So I just wanted to let you know, if you go to Axeman, you can find things like this in bins in the store. So Axeman is a salvage store. There's one in St. Paul and one in St. Louis Park. And they're back up and running. I went in with my mask on and they're still running. You never know what you're gonna find there, but I did find those little things. So when you're doing your wiring, the Minnesota Watercolor Society's perspective says they want that wire to go so that when your piece is hanging, the wire is about 2 inches from the top edge. So if we were pretending this was the piece that I was going to enter, and you have to understand, I would have to turn that around because otherwise my painting would hang upside down. What I would do would be to get a ruler, and I've got this marked at 2 inches here, and I would want the top of that to be taut enough so that it would measure the 2 inches when I pull it a little bit. Here's another thing. When you're doing your framing, unless you have a professional framer that does this, and they should do all this, when you put your wire on, you notice, I don't know if you can see on camera, but one side of that wire already has something wrapped around it. You might be thinking, what's wrapped around her wire? Well, it's something that is simple and easy to do. That wire edge can hurt other people who are hanging the show, can hurt their fingers. So what you do is take a little piece of masking tape. And where do you suppose I got my masking tape? Axeman. And you want to just wrap this around here. So there are a couple of things I say: never throw anything away. Find ways to do things cheaper. Okay, so both sides of my wire now are protected. And if I had put it on correctly, it would hang, although I could hang this so that the butterfly's upside down, but I wouldn't like it. I like it like that. So I would just take those 2 little screw eyes out and put them so that this hangs correctly. But here's the other thing, back to this kind of frame. Why do you suppose I have this frame on hand? Well, because I reuse my frames. This is a nice, like, nondescript plain frame. And I have purchased many plain frames that are just plain black or plain wood, and I reuse them. So when something comes back from, like, say I have a piece that didn't sell in a show, what I do is I will either reframe it to a client's delight if someone does want to purchase it, but they don't want the show frame and the show mat, which is just plain white or off-white. When I have it reframed, then I keep the old frame and I keep the old mat too. And if the plexiglass, because I usually paint pretty big, if the plexiglass hasn't been dinged up, and plexis, it's easy to scratch, then if that happens, then I think, oh well, I guess I'll just have to change it. And that's just one of the downsides of when you're involved in entering shows. Things can get dinged and framed and dented.
We have another question that goes back to the mounting of it. Can you also mount the painting to a wood or gesso panel?
Yes, I've done that too. I have wooden panels that I've mounted to, and ones that have the gesso on them. You just may have to make sure if there's an edge showing like this, it has to be white or off-white. So then you would have to, like a gesso board usually comes white. So if it's a black gesso board, you're not allowed to enter painting in a Minnesota Watercolor Society with a black mat. So you would have to paint that if you used a black gesso board. But most of the gesso boards I bought have been white. But one of the paintings that I submitted to Minnesota Watercolor Society, maybe it was 2017, I mounted that to a wooden board, and I just had the painting come to the edge of the wood. And then, because when you were face on, the painting went all the way to the edge, what I did was these sides, I actually painted them. So you have to think about what are you going to do for the presentation. So a wood panel is perfectly fine. I've done that. A canvas panel is perfectly fine. I've done that. A gesso board, that's fine. I usually will get them at Dick Blick. And then when I go through this process, I have hardly any left because people love how they look. They don't have to have, you know, the big frame. They just get the artwork. They're protected. They're lightweight. I did 3 panels like this for a client. She had seen what I submitted to the Minnesota Watercolor Society show on a wooden panel. And she said, what if I wanted something bigger? And I said, well, you know, a wooden panel, I can get wooden panels bigger. They'll be heavier, but I could do it on canvas. So I did it. I did 3 pieces for her that were matching. It was a triptych. And they were 3 feet by 4 feet each one. So, and they were, it was a birch woods scene. So that part, that triptych is quite large. It was like 80 inches, 80 some inches long because each panel was 3 feet by 4 feet. So I did this process, but larger. And I've done one that was 4 feet by 6 feet. And then the biggest one I've ever done was 72 inches by 51 inches. And the 51 inches was because that was how tall my roll of watercolor paper was. So when you're working huge, you need to buy a roll of watercolor paper. And that's kind of fun to do. And why do I do it? Well, I don't know. I just like doing that kind of thing. And I liked experimenting with figuring out how can I adhere it to something that's going to be reasonable. I think that's fun. Okay, couple little things to keep in mind. If you're doing your own matting and framing, whether you do this technique or just a regular frame with glass or plexiglass, when you're doing it, and this is going to sound kind of picky, but I'm telling you, be careful. Don't wear a fuzzy sweater and don't wear a new polar fleece. Why do I say that? Static electricity can build up in wherever you're working. And in this case, if there was static electricity and I was wearing a wool sweater or a new polar fleece, you can sometimes see it happening. The fuzzies that you're wearing will stick to the surface that you're working with. So that can actually happen when you're painting too. I have taught workshops where people have said, suddenly my surface looks like it's furry. And I always look at what they're wearing. And sure enough, they'll be wearing like a cashmere or mohair sweater. And I'll say, there's static electricity in the room and it's an attraction thing. And it's sticking to your paper. And as you're painting water on it, it's showing up. So when I'm in my studio painting, I pick out my clothes based on that. I don't want anything that's fuzzy that'll stick to a surface with static electricity, because there's nothing more irritating than getting a whole thing framed under glass. You finally gotten it all so that it's perfect, and then you turn it over to look at the finished product and you see a bunch of fuzzies in it, because the fuzzies will also stick to a mat. So that's awfully irritating. If you go into professional framers, they're wearing white gloves. They're in a room where you watch the framers. They're usually wearing black clothes that don't shed. So that fuzz thing is something to definitely pay attention to, because when you're doing, like, say you're painting acrylic paint, you don't want any little fuzzes sticking to the acrylic. If you have any questions about what I've said so far, I think I've covered the idea about read the exhibition rules, read them thoroughly. Please take note whether your painting is appropriate to submit it, because there is that 2-year, your painting should have been completed within the last 2 years. And I know some show chairs aren't as picky as others. I've seen some paintings where the artist has actually put the date on, and I think, that painting's older than 2 years. So it's just something to think about. It's technically, it should have been disqualified from the show. But, I don't call other artists on that. I try to be generous and kind, but we do have rules in place. Oh, is there a question?
I'm sorry, yes, there's one more question, Georgia, about that process. Will this work with 300-pound paper?
You know what? I have done it with 300-pound and it does work. You just feel a bigger ridge along the edge. But here's what I thought. I thought, well, if I use 300-pound paper, maybe I'll be able to get it off. And guess what? It makes such a seal. It becomes one with what's beneath. Now, with a wooden board, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if you could take a scraper and get it off, but I could not get the 300-pound off of a canvas. And I have also done 300-pound onto a wooden panel. And once it's on, I can't get it off. But again, I didn't take like a chisel and a hammer to go at it. Actually, those sold. They sold at the show. Anyway, the reason I remember that is I kind of wanted that. I always liked selling a painting, but I hadn't had that one very long. I finished it just before the show and put it in the show, and I put a pretty high price on it, but it sold at the show.
There's just one more question, Georgia, that came in that said they're asking, when you asked for the size of the artwork, does that mean the framed or just the image size?
I'll tell you, it means the outside of the frame in most cases. And I'm really careful about that because I have a friend who entered a piece and she thought she was well within the requirements but she measured from here to here and there to there, not taking into account the inches that the frame was. And the whole thing framed and done was, I think, like a ½ inch bigger. And whoever was the intake person would not accept her painting. And I thought, wow, that's picky. But again, if it's you can't count on someone being like I am a little bit. Oh, you're pretty close. Okay, I'll let it in. I was insistent on white or off-white mats when I was show chair, and I was also insistent that anything in the show had to be within the last 2 years painted. And I did have to call someone. I said, here's your choice. I'm willing to let you change out the mat, because someone brought their piece in with a really dark charcoal mat, not quite black, but almost black. And I said, the rules say it has to be white or off white. The rules are available to everybody. You're encouraged to read them. And if you didn't follow those rules, here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to give you time. So I gave him a day. And I said, if you can get a white or an off-white mat in, then I will still accept it in the hanging. So he did. He changed out the mat and brought it back. But what I wanted to talk to you about is some differences for some of the national shows and how they differ from Minnesota Watercolor Society's prospectus. Not all societies have the exact same set of rules. You have to read them because there are differences between the major shows that I've been entering. And so here's one thing. I entered Missouri one year, Missouri, because someone told me it was a really cool show to enter. And I got in and sent my piece there, and I didn't win an award, but I felt like, oh, that's neat. I got into Missouri's show. And then, it came back to me. And then I thought, wait a minute, I don't want to teach in Missouri. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't teach, but I don't market myself to teach in Missouri. And I thought, I didn't win an award. I didn't win any money. It cost me, $150 to frame the piece, and it was another $100 and some to send it there and have it returned to me. And that changed my thinking about what shows I was going to enter. I decided from then on, I wasn't going to enter shows that weren't national on a national level. And there are two things. First of all, Missouri actually showed in Spain last year. And then I thought, oh, maybe I should have changed my mind, because that would have been kind of cool to have a piece in a show that was in Spain. Um, but, and actually, I don't mean last year, I actually mean 2 years ago. I decided I would only enter the national shows like TWSA is Transparent Watercolor Society of America. Watercolor West is in California, and those two happen to be the only purely transparent watercolor societies in the nation. So if you enter those shows, your painting needs to be totally transparent watercolor. And what does that mean? It means you can use some of the opaque watercolors like cerulean and yellow ochre, but you have to use them in a transparent manner, meaning you can't squirt them right out of the tube onto the surface of your painting. So it's almost like painting in acrylic. You can't do that. Um, you cannot use Chinese white or titanium white for those societies because it's not see-through. And you can't use any of the sparkly colors because they're not see-through. And you certainly can't use gouache, casing, or acrylic paint if you're entering those two. So again, that's Watercolor West in California, and Transparent Watercolor Society is in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I had my cap set at both of those because I mostly paint transparent watercolor. In other words, I handle my watercolor with um, water so that it's see-through, and I don't squirt paint right out of the tube, put it onto the surface. Now I don't say I I usually don't, and I never say never because sometimes I do exactly that. But if I did, I wouldn't enter those two shows with that piece. The painting of my granddaughter that was on the cover of the Brushstrokes magazine here, and I actually have that in my studio. I'll get it for you because there's there's an interesting thing about this painting. I love it because I love my granddaughter, and when I finished the painting, I thought, ooh, that turned out, that's a showpiece. So before I give it to my daughter or hang it at my house, I'm not sure which yet, but I thought it's a showpiece. I could not enter this in Transparent Watercolor Society or Watercolor West because as I was working, and you can't really even tell, but I worked on her teeth and I changed my mind. And then I had to take out my titanium white watercolor and whiten up her teeth a little bit, just the two front teeth. That's enough to knock it out. I used titanium white on her teeth. Now, I could have tried sanding it, and this is 300-pound paper, so that would have been a possibility, but it was so perfect the way it was. I thought, well, I won't enter it in those shows in Transparent Watercolor Society or Watercolor West because there's a little bit of titanium white watercolor, and that's against the rules for those two societies. So the other thing I thought would be interesting is to tell you those societies. Watercolor West is really picky. They tell you exactly how wide your frame should be if you get in, and exactly the matting you need to use for it. What's different is Transparent Watercolor Society isn't as picky about what matting you use or what actual frame they request, that it's a simple frame, but they're not as picky in giving you exactly the measurements of the frame that you should use. Okay, two other national societies are American Watercolor Society and National Watercolor Society. I have entered both of those, but I've never gotten in yet. I have gotten into Transparent Watercolor Society twice. So if I get in one more time, I will have signature status. So I'm going to make a submission to Transparent Watercolor Society within the next couple weeks. And you know, fingers crossed. I'd love to get my signature status with Transparent, because I do have it already with Watercolor West. But back to American Watercolor Society and National Watercolor Society, Those societies are very flexible. They're like Minnesota Watercolor Society in that they're water media organizations. So you can enter paintings on Yupo. You can enter acrylic in your paintings. You can enter gouache, and you can enter casein, and you can have mixtures of all four of those. Or you could have, any combination you want. Those societies are a lot more flexible. They're like Minnesota and like North Star. Those are all water media organizations. So you don't have to be so careful about making sure that everything is totally transparent. American Watercolor Society, they don't have that 2-year age of the painting restriction. That's a difference. American Watercolor Society, I looked that up because I saw somebody's painting that was in, and I thought, I saw that in a show about 4 years ago. So I know that's not just 2 years old. So and I saw nowhere in their prospectus where the painting needs to be completed within the last 2 years. And then the interesting difference in National Watercolor Society is that if you enter a painting in that society, in National Watercolor Society, you cannot have shown that in any other national show before. So I had a piece that was in North Star's national show, and I was thinking I would enter that piece when it didn't sell in National Watercolor Society. And then luckily, when I read through the prospectus, I thought, oh, I can't enter that. It was already in North Stars because North Stars is a national show. So I couldn't enter the piece that I wanted to in National Watercolor Society. It has to be a painting that has never been exhibited in a national or international show. Now I'm just going to briefly talk about shipping. What I did was went to FedEx and I got an account with FedEx so that I can pack up my painting in a strong box. And Strong Box is a company that makes super strong cardboard boxes. So just remember that, Strong Box. You can look it up online. And then FedEx actually started making boxes to compete with Strong Box. They were a little more expensive because my Strong Box has been around the block a few times, and I'm in need of a new Strong Box if I get into another national show. If I do, I will check online and see what the price of replacing my current Strong Box is with another Strong Box, and then I'll compare that with FedEx's price. So it is expensive to enter the national shows, but once in a while, something cool happens. Like first time I entered Watercolor West, I got the trifecta. So I got into a national show, and it's actually, that one's international. So I got into the international show. I won an award. So I got money from getting an award, and the piece sold at the show. So sometimes that happens, but most of the time I get them back. And when I get them back, I will either exhibit them elsewhere in a different frame and keep the show frame for another go around, again, after I've inspected the plexiglass. Because when you send paintings, they need to be sent with plexiglass. It's too dangerous to send regular glass. And that's mostly a requirement in the prospectus. Well, I had so much I wanted to share, and I thought it was really good to be able to show you in my studio how to do your framing a couple different ways, and also how to think about, all right, how am I going to do this without spending a fortune? And sometimes you'll sell and make some money on it, and that's cool, but a lot of times you get it back. So if you get it back and you think, oh man, now I'm out all that money, you can think like that, but I'll tell you, some interesting things have happened to me. The last time I was in Watercolor West show, Core Paints contacted me and said, we saw your painting at the Watercolor West show, and we'd like you to try out some of our colors. So Core sent me some paint. I thought that was cool. And then paper companies have contacted me after the first time I got in Transparent Watercolor Society, and I'd gotten in, and I didn't win an award, but my painting sold there. And that painting, they said, we saw your piece and we're impressed with it. We'd like you to try our papers and tell us feedback. So I thought that was really fun. And you raise your profile. You just never know what's going to happen. I've had people see my work in shows and then they contact me and say, would you paint blah, blah, blah for me? Now, some people don't do commission work. I don't promise what I can't deliver, but I'm pretty open. I'll tell you this story. This was cool. One time I painted 2 paintings because I thought, well, I'll do one, and I was nervous thinking, what if they don't like this one? So I painted another one, and it was similar, not identical, but I thought, I'll give them their choice. The client bought both of them. And I just got a Christmas card this year. She said, I still look at both of those paintings every day. And so it just made my heart warm. And so I follow my instincts. If something occurs to me, I do it. Was painted again, not thinking. I never dreamed of buying them both because they were full sheets, fully framed. And I thought, wow, that was pretty cool. I don't paint for the judge. What I do is enter what I feel comfortable with. So like the year, what's his name? Lauren McCracken paints like photoreal. He's a wonderful painter, but paints things that look like, the clearest photograph you've ever seen. And I entered an abstract, and you know what? I got in the show. So what can I say? But enter what you feel good about. Enter what you think is the best representation of your work. And I think of entering shows of a way of communicating with other people in a way where we don't have to exchange any words. They'll know what I think based on what they're looking at. It's a communication or a dialogue that you get to have with your viewing public. And I think that's so cool. I love to do it. Do teach Zoom classes while we're all sequestering. And if you want to be on my email blast list, you can find me through my website, which is kandicoandkandico.com, or I can just give you my email. It's gkandico@gmail.com. I encourage you to enter. It's so much fun. But again, remember what I said when we first began. If it's going to break your heart, if you get a no, then wait. Wait until you feel more confident and you understand that idea that it's a subjective decision based on the judge. And so if you get a no and a decline, it doesn't mean you're a bad painter. It means your vision wasn't in line with what the judges were looking for that show. And I'll leave you on this last little thing. I entered a painting to 2 different shows, and Chenki Chi was the judge of both of those shows, national shows. Chenki Chi turned that painting down in one show and accepted it, juried it in another show. It was the same judge. And I happened to really like him. I took a workshop from him and just loved him dearly. So there's just that. And I just encourage you, paint what's meaningful to you and enter what you feel confident about. And again, examine yourself. If it's going to be too much of a heartbreaker, don't do it. Wait until you're sturdier. All right. Well, thank you for asking me to talk to you tonight. I was thinking, oh man, how do I make this be entertaining? I hope I've entertained you, and I hope I have given you some thoughts and ideas about ways you can present your work and make it look professional.
Well, thank you so much, Georgia. I really appreciate it. And I found it very, very informational and very helpful. I'm really looking forward to trying taking a watercolor and putting it on canvas.
Yeah.
The way that you talked about, I think that's just going to be a great experiment I'm going to have. So it was just very helpful. Just really appreciate your time and your demo and your information, sharing everything with us. And I also thank everyone that attended this remote meeting. Thank you very much, all the members that attended. And if no one has any other questions, we'll go ahead and end the meeting.
Okay, good night, everybody. Bye.